True Gay Crime contains coarse language, adult themes, and content that is violent and disturbing. If at any time you feel you need help, please refer to the toll-free crisis lines in the show notes. Welcome to another episode of True Gay Crime. I'm your host, Patrick Marano. And on today's episode, we cover Andrew Cunanan. This is a big one. I know you've already heard of this guy. He's been covered by many other podcasts and many times on TV, but I want to sink my teeth into this story and share it with you from the true gay crime perspective. So Andrew, as you probably know, was a spree killer known to have murdered 5 people during a 3-month period in mid-1997. He's described as a chronic liar and consumer of status with an avid appetite for sadomasochistic pornography. He went by several different names, and usually when these killers have also known ases, it's because of the area that they were killing or the type of killings that they were doing, and it's an AKA that's given to them from other people. But in this case, his AKAs, he gave himself because he was such a liar. He was always coming up with these new identities. So he also went by Andrew De Silva. He also went by Lieutenant Commander Andy Cummings, Drew Cunningham, and Kurt Matthew Desmarais. So, I mean, I can barely keep up with my own life and my own identity. Imagine coming up with all these, oh my God. But before we get into the story, I want to send a quick reminder to all of you who are listening to this podcast and enjoying True Gay Crime to make sure to tell a friend about it and spread True Gay Crime love out into the universe. And a reminder, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, that you can rate and review True Gay Crime. It really helps me out because it tells Apple to show my podcast to more people. My sources for this story were Wikipedia, harpersbazaar.com, and a beautiful article in vanityfair.com. So, without further ado, here is the story of Andrew Cunanan. It's San Francisco, 1990, and we find ourselves at a gay hotspot, Colossus. Gianni Versace is in town, having designed the costumes and overseeing the fitting in the San Francisco opera production of Richard Strauss's Capriccio. That night is October 21st, and 21-year-old Andrew Cunanan is making his rounds of the club. There's no secret he deals drugs. He doesn't even try to hide it. In fact, he brags about how connected he is, and he splashes the cash to impress anyone who's looking. Suddenly, Cunanan spots Versace from across the room. His eyes focused like a leopard on its prey. Nothing can break his stare as he gets closer and closer to the famous designer. When he's close enough, he makes himself be seen. Versace looks in his direction and, for whatever reason, believes he recognizes Cunanan. "I know you," Versace says, wagging a finger in his direction. "Lago di Como, no?" Not missing a beat or the opportunity to make a connection with the rich and famous man, Cunanan replies, "Thank you for remembering, Signor Versace." Of course, Cunanan knew very well he had never, ever been to Lake Como in his life. Versace's family denies the two men ever meet, and if they didn't, well, it would just be another one of Cunanan's many, many lies. But if they did, what happened between them in San Francisco that Versace would end up dead 7 years later by Cunanan's hand? Let's try to figure it out together. Andrew Philip Cunanan is born August 31st, 1969, the youngest of 4 kids. His dad, Modesto Pete Cunanan, was Filipino-American, and his mom, Mary Ann Schillaci, is an Italian-American. His dad serves in the U.S. Navy during Vietnam, then works as a stockbroker. Cunanan grows up in National City, which is in the South Bay region of San Diego. He's enrolled in an independent day school in La Jolla, which is a ritzy neighborhood, where teachers say that he's bright, talkative, and has a high IQ of 147. Why are they testing your IQ at 12? I mean, as a teen, he learns that he's a really good liar. He likes to exaggerate his family's money and influence and spins elaborate tales of people he's never met and his importance in their lives. He's a chameleon, able to change his appearance to suit the moment and to appear to be what other people want him to be. He identifies as gay. True to form, he was voted least likely to be forgotten in his high school yearbook. After graduation, he goes to UC San Diego and studies American history for like a minute. In 1988, his dad flees the country and abandons the family he's wanted for embezzlement of $100,000 at work and runs away back to the Philippines. It's around this time that Cunanan starts going out to gay bars in San Diego and goes by the name Andrew De Silva. His mom, Marianne, is a devout Catholic, a bright but emotionally fragile woman. She knows that her son is sneaking off, and she's got a big problem with this. So they fight, and his temper and his ability to lose control cost his mom dearly when he slams her up against a wall, dislocating her shoulder. No surprise, we'd learn later that he suffers from antisocial personality disorder, including a lack of remorse and empathy, as many killers do. He doesn't last long at university either, and in 1989 he drops out and joins an escorting service to make quick money. He calls himself Tony and flies back and forth between California and Florida. In California, he continues to hunt and use older wealthy men to advance his needs, and he bounces between the Castro in San Francisco, Hillcrest in San Diego, and La Jolla, and Scottsdale in Arizona. To supplement his lifestyle, he starts dealing drugs like prescription opioids, Percodan, Vicodin, also cocaine and pot. Of course, not only is that illegal, but Cunanan would eventually fall into the trap that a lot of dealers fall into, which is they start using their own supply. And to keep up with his lies, he invents aliases, like I mentioned before. Andrew De Silva, Lieutenant Commander Andy Cummings, Drew Cunningham, Kurt, Matthew Desmarais. Speaking of his lies, I'm just going to run through, because during the whole story, it's all peppered with lies. So instead of like trying to keep up with all of his lies, I've sort of condensed them all into a list of lies that he tells people along his path, his destructive path of his life. So here's a few of the doozies. He tells people that he's descended from Sephardic Jews, which is a Jewish ethnic division originating from traditionally established communities in the Iberian Peninsula. Why he would say that? Who knows? He tries to convince people that he never looks at the price of anything and that his family never looks at prices. They just buy things, they never look at prices. He said he was married to a Jewish woman and his father-in-law was the head of the Mossad, which I did have to Google. Mossad is the National Intelligence Agency of Israel. Mossad is responsible for intelligence collection, covert operations, and counterterrorism for Israel. He also said that he had gone to Coate, which is spelled Choate. It's a school. It's a really fancy boarding school in Connecticut. He says that he dropped out of Yale and then he transferred to Bennington, which is a private art school and among one of the most expensive in the country. So, I mean, he did his research. Like, he was telling lies about things that were really well researched that not a lot of people would know about. I had never heard of these, Yale, of course, but I mean, the other ones, it's kind of like you would only have to be in those circles and be of that social standing to maybe have even heard of those places, you know? He said he had been married to a Jewish princess and he had fathered a daughter at one point. He also says that his father, he said, was a Filipino general close to the ousted dictator Ferdinand Marcos, who was the former president of the Philippines, and that his dad was bisexual, and that he had a younger lover whom Andrew resented because he said, "Oh, my dad's lover has a car and I don't." Like, what are these lies? Like, what a weird, elaborate lie to come up about your father, and so specific, like complaining, you're even complaining in the lie that you don't have a car, but your dad's lover. Okay, he bragged about having a pilot's license and that a Filipino senator would hire him to fly around. He said his father was an Israeli millionaire. He said other times that he was a Fifth Avenue aristocrat. And according to Cunanan, his mom would often have spa days with Debbie Harry. Okay. He also said that his mom was a spoiled Jewish mother who stayed with his father in an unhappy marriage, only so that the children would not lose their vast inheritance. He brags about knowing Lisa Kudrow, Liz Hurley, and Madonna. Like, okay, Madonna I get. Why the other ones? Like, I am a big Lisa Kudrow fan, and if you have not seen The Comeback, like, run and watch The Comeback with Lisa Kudrow. Amazing. But I love that he was bragging, I guess because Friends was so big at the time. So that was a funny choice. He'd fake knowing what the texture of a blowfish was like when he supposedly dined at a Japanese restaurant with a bill that came to $850. Not true. He also talked about having millions of dollars confiscated from foreign bank accounts through FBI subpoenas and warrants. Not true. But I like this one. This is a good one. He once told a story that he had dinner with somebody, and he was talking to a group, and he was lying to the group that he had had dinner with somebody, but one of the people in the group knew that the person he was talking about had been dead for 2 years. So, I mean, I don't know. I hate lying. I hate it because it's like, it's too much. You got to remember everything. You got to remember. I don't want to remember. So I just tell the truth. It's easier. Anyway, it's clear very early on that he sets the stage for himself in the role of a con artist and a court jester. He's lying, he's entertaining, he's distracting people so that he can live well without working. Okay, we're following the timeline. Let's go to San Francisco. It's 1990. Cunanan allegedly meets Versace at that gay club. Then, 5 years later, in December 1995, Cunanan is out at a gay bar. Well, big surprise. This guy is out all the time because, I mean, he lives to impress. So if you're not surrounded by people, who are you impressing? That night, he meets a Minneapolis architect by the name of David Madsen. The two hit it off, and when David goes back to Minneapolis, they continue a long-distance relationship. But eventually, David ends it in the spring of 96 when he senses something shady about Cunanan. Of course, the shady thing that he's probably sensing is that Cunanan is a liar, a drug dealer, and a kept boy, because while he's with David, he's also seeing a man named Norman Blatchford. Cunanan devours information. As we know, he's very intelligent, and specifically, he likes to have information that can help his cause. His cause, of course, is to be seen as affluent, connected, and enviable. He researches and tracks sugar daddies carefully and targets the ones he knows has no family. Then he places himself in front of them. He's smiling, charming, and intelligent. One of his last older male conquests is Norman Blatchford. He's a conservative, retired millionaire in his 60s. Norman lavishes gifts on Cunanan and lets him stay at his seaside condo and a hillside house in La Jolla. Crazy side story. Okay, get this. Cunanan urges Norman to sell his home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and to move into a La Jolla house. This house in La Jolla was previously owned by Lincoln Aston, who's another wealthy, older, quote-unquote, friend of Cunanan's, and who was murdered the year before. He was bludgeoned by a stone obelisk. However, okay, so you're probably thinking, oh my God, Cunanan killed that guy too. But no, the police convict a, quote, mentally troubled loner who apparently Lincoln had brought home. But it seems kind of suspicious that Cunanan would know this older, wealthy man who was murdered. I mean, in hindsight, it looks suspicious. Anyway, Norman is very well connected. In fact, he belongs to Gamma Mu, which is an extremely private fraternity of rich Republican gays. Twice a year, they all get together in cities around the world. Now, I don't know what they do at these things that they call fly-ins, if it's a social thing or if it's a huge orgy, like are they flying in hot men? It sounds very orgy-esque, but maybe it's just a networking event. It's through Norman that Cunanan gets inside this elite group of powerful, often closeted gay men. And, you know, obviously he's an unstable guy, and now he has privileged information that could easily be used to blackmail these people. So this is like a ticking time bomb situation. Norman introduced Cunanan to his friends. He gives him a $2,000 a month allowance and the use of his 1996 Infiniti i30T, which I Googled because I don't know anything about cars. And I was expecting something flashier. Like, it's just a very, I mean, it's probably an expensive car. It's probably like a reliable car. I don't know. I don't know why. It's not flashy. It doesn't look like money. Maybe you need inside information to know. Anyhow, they fly often to New York City to see Broadway shows. They travel and they go to Paris and the south of France in June of 96, and they dine in expensive restaurants. They're lying by pools and they're being pampered. Okay. Before heading home from France, Norman and Cunanan make a stop in East Hampton, and they stay with a wealthy gay couple in July of 96. They go to parties, they eat at the trendiest restaurants, and he's a charming companion, if not a little full of tall tales, is what we're calling them now, tall tales. Also, he made it pretty clear to everyone that he's just using older guys for their money, and he would say this out loud, even to Norman. Which I suppose, like, who are we kidding? But still, like, you don't say it. Like, obviously, we all know you don't gotta say it. Like, a little decorum, right? The good times with Norman do not last that long, because soon after they get back from the Hamptons in September of 96, Norman and Cunanan call it quits, with Cunanan moving in with some of his San Diego friends, complaining that Norman was, quote, cheap. And the least Norman could have done, he said, was give him a Mercedes 500 SL. I mean, so obnoxious. Also, he says that they should have been flying first class and that Norman should have repainted all the rooms in the La Jolla house. I mean, that's a normal list of demands for a kid to have with his, like, sugar daddy, right? Cunanan may have been tired of all of Norman's nickel and diming, but he was pretty shocked when Norman let him go without a fight. He was really expecting that Norman was going to be like, no, don't leave, please. Oh, God, I'll do anything. But Norman's like, okay, bye, bitch. So, and actually, hindsight, Norman's lucky to be alive. I mean, to have survived this whole situation. So Cunanan spirals down a hole of painkillers and alcohol. Now that he's on his own, he's not kept by any overly generous support of Norman. His financial situation is nosediving. From October 96 to April 97, or more easily said, in the 7 months post-Norman, Cunanan racks up huge debt. He blows through the $15,000 he got from the sale of the Infiniti, which was the car that Norman gave him. He spends the entire loan he took out from a bank, and he maxes out his 2 credit cards, in total spending about $85,000. So he's not good with money. And it's in this financial hole that Cunanan decides he's leaving San Diego for Minneapolis to visit, quote, the love of my life, who is David Madsen, the guy the architect from Minneapolis that he had met in San Francisco. They had the long-distance relationship. Also, Cunanan's best buddy, or so he thought was his best buddy, Jeff Trail, also lives in Minneapolis, and he said he was going to visit Jeff to, quote, take care of some business matters, and also said that he was going to start a business making prefabricated movie sets with his friend named Duke Miglin. Earmark the Miglin name for a little bit later in the story. And just side note, in order to buy a ticket to Minneapolis, he had to get a credit extension on his credit card, and he only gets a one-way. He can only afford a one-way ticket. To commemorate his departure, he summons 4 of his friends to a farewell dinner at California Cuisine on April 24th. Of course, the invitation didn't mean he would foot the bill, because this time he has $0. Historically, when he was going out with his friends, he would pay for everybody. He would leave $200 tips. Like, he was really splashing the cash. But, I mean, most of his business was cash anyway. I mean, he had sugar daddies giving him money. He was selling drugs. It's all cash. So when he takes his friends out, he's trying to impress them. Like, look at me. I'm so impressive. I've got so much money. Anyway, this time he has zero. I mean, he's really falling down the hole. He has zero money. So his friends ponied up the cash to pay for him for this meal. So he tells them that he's uncomfortable having the 2 people that he cares most about in the world living so far away from him. And of course, he's talking about David Madsen and Jeff Trail. Of course, these guys don't give 2 shits about Cunanan, but he doesn't know that. Everyone thinks that he's going for a visit in Minneapolis before moving permanently to San Francisco. No one knows Cunanan only buys a one-way ticket to Minneapolis. At this point, he basically has nothing. He has no money. He's got no prospects. He has no connections. He's not the young, cute twink that he was before. He's drinking and doing drugs like it's going out of style. He's also been rejected by not only his wealthy patron Norman, but the love of his life, David Madsen. So in the back of his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Minneapolis and win back David. His drug of choice is methamphetamines. Now, if you have a propensity for crazy, then meth will push you over the edge. I watched many an acquaintance fall down a dark, methy hole. They lose all their friends, jobs, houses. It is a killer. So all that to say, for someone like Cunanan, drugs are not good. So it's in this state of downward spiral that Cunanan lands in Minneapolis on April 25th. David Madsen, being the good friend and former lover that he is, picks up Cunanan from the airport. Now, David is a rising star in the architect world, is Cunanan's greatest love. Well, in his mind, Cunanan just never got over his infatuation with David, even keeping a picture of him taped to his fridge. Oh my God, remember photos? Remember physical photos? But let's discover a little bit about David Madsen, the person. He's a former ski instructor, very charismatic guy who worked for the John Ryan Company, designing retail financial centers for large. Okay, the point is he's well paid, he's good at what he does, and his job takes him around the country. He's known as a peacemaker among his friends it's a guy who hated confrontation, who could talk his way out of anything. He loved to save people, and he rooted for the underdog. The two guys experimented with SM restraints, etc. They're both really into it, but Cunanan tries to take it further than David is comfortable with. Then, like I mentioned earlier, David ends the long-distance relationship, partly due to the urging of his friends, because Cunanan is unreachable for stretches of time. Remember, this is also because he's living out in La Jolla with Norman. A lot of the research that I did really emphasized the fact that David and Cunanan had this sort of SM relationship where Cunanan was the dom top and then David being the submissive one. So they were really driving it home that they had that base of a relationship where Cunanan was able to control David, which does come in to the story shortly. So despite them breaking up, David wants to help Cunanan get his life together. Quote, David was apprehensive about Andrew's visit, says Cedric Rucker, one of David's last boyfriends. Quote, he held suspicions that Cunanan was involved in the international drug trade, bringing drugs into the country from across the Mexican border. He probably has ties to organized crime. Why would you want to be affiliated with this? David said, quote, because I'm trying to make a change in his life. He just needs help. No good deed goes unpunished. Unpunished. That's from Wicked. You're welcome. But that night at a dinner with David and his work friends, Cunanan is at it again. So he is not turning over a new leaf at all, as David sort of was hoping that he would. He's being his old Cunanan self again. After professing to having turned over a new leaf and ready to start a life of not lying or coveting material wealth, at dinner, Cunanan is lying and he's showing off expensive gifts like a gold Cartier watch that he gives to David. The watch is apparently a thank you to David for helping Cunanan turn his life around, but Cunanan forces David to show it off to his colleagues in an attempt to get the ooh, ahs. He talks about having been driven around in a Rolls Royce as a child, etc., etc. Later that evening, David and Cunanan meet David's best friend for a drink. Her name is Monique Salvetti. He continues his lies about starting companies, making big important deals. Poor Monique, can you imagine having to listen to all this bullshit? She's probably like, David, why do you know this person? After drinks, they head out to the Gay 90s nightclub, which is absolutely a place I would love to go. Imagine a nightclub called the Gay 90s. That's my jam. So he stays with David in his loft apartment that night. The next day, April 26th, Cunanan goes to stay at his buddy Jeff Trail's house while Jeff is out of town with his boyfriend John Hackett. Cunanan considers Jeff one of his best friends and he calls him, quote, my brother. Of course, as we know, it's not reciprocated. This is probably a good time to talk about how Cunanan and Jeff know each other. So, being in the U.S. Navy, Jeff was stationed in San Diego in 1991, where the two would go target shooting together. Remember, Cunanan knows everybody, and he basically works as Hillcrest's unofficial welcome wagon, so it's no surprise that they know each other. Anyway, Jeff was a small arms instructor in the Navy and an excellent marksman. He left the Navy in 96 and he joins the training program for the California Highway Patrol, but he doesn't like the job. He quits and finds another job as a district manager for Farrell Gas, a propane retailer in a suburb of Minneapolis. So, Jeff was conservative and deeply opposed to drugs, so what he had in common with Cunanan, we will never know. Oh, well, guns, I suppose, is one thing. Cunanan, of course, is knee-deep in drugs and even asks Jeff if he wants to be security for his, quote, import-export business. Jeff isn't stupid. He knows it's about drugs, and he says no. And the relationship gets even weirder from there. Like at a dinner in San Francisco, Cunanan tells people that Jeff is his oldest friend from kindergarten or first grade, which of course isn't true. They basically just met. And Jeff hated being put in the middle of Cunanan's lies. He doesn't want to be a part of it. Apparently, Jeff felt sorry for Cunanan, and he was just putting up with his bullshit. So when Cunanan says he's coming for a visit, Jeff is not impressed. But no matter, because he would be gone for most of the weekend with his boyfriend, celebrating his boyfriend's 21st birthday. So, while Jeff and his boyfriend John are away, Cunanan gets the keys that are left for him under the doormat. I mean, the doormat, really? Come on. He lets himself into the apartment. He spends Saturday night there, and Sunday morning, we know that he does take a message around 10 a.m. from one of Jeff's softball buddies, signing the message, "Love, Andrew." While they're out of town, and while Cunanan is staying at Jeff's place, Jeff tells his boyfriend that he needs to have a serious talk with Cunanan about something pretty important that would take about 30 minutes. But when Jeff and his boyfriend get home the next day, there's no sign of Cunanan or his luggage. Around 8 p.m., Jeff gets a voicemail from Cunanan saying, "Give me a call, please. I'd like to see you." Jeff considers blowing him off because he doesn't like the guy, but he changes his mind. He gets in his car, and he leaves his place just after 9 p.m. Shit is about to hit the fan, folks. Oh, God. Okay. Now we know it's about 9:45 p.m. because the caller ID on David's intercom phone shows the time that someone is buzzed up to the loft. When Jeff gets up to David's loft, Cunanan is waiting for him. He sneaks up behind him, and he hits him with a hammer, and then he keeps smashing his face repeatedly while David watches. Now, I just watched a clip of the Assassination of Gianni Versace and the scene. I've seen the whole thing, but I just watched the YouTube clip because I wanted to get a clearer image of how this could have gone down. Because you read, there's slightly varying accounts of how this could have happened. So in the American Crime Story version of this, Jeff shows up at the loft. He buzzes downstairs. David is home, and David, in this version, goes downstairs to get Jeff. Jeff and David enter the building. They go up the elevator and enter David's loft, where Cunanan is waiting with a hammer. The door slams shut. He comes up behind Jeff, and he just starts wailing on him with the hammer while David watches in horror, which is basically the information that I got. I didn't read anything about actually David going downstairs to get Jeff from the front door, but regardless, David is there while he's watching Cunanan bash in Jeff's face. Like, a lot. So a neighbor who was home at the time allegedly hears yelling, fighting, get the fuck out. So maybe there was a verbal altercation before the bashing happened. According to the Assassination of Gianni Versace from American Crime Story, there was no discussion. It was basically he walks in the door and he just starts wailing on him with the hammer. But from some research that I did, there was a neighbor that actually hears a verbal fight, and he hears the words "get the fuck out." Then he hears there's shaking, there's thumping against the wall for about a minute, and then there's the sound of water running. The neighbor looks out of his door, but the hallway is empty. He doesn't see anything. So something along those lines happened. The point is, Jeff has now been murdered by Cunanan with a hammer bashed in the face. But Jeff was supposed to meet his boyfriend, John, at the gay club. So when he doesn't show up, the boyfriend starts to get worried because it's his birthday and Jeff wouldn't stand him up. Now it's Monday morning and Jeff never comes home. So the boyfriend, John, starts calling the hospitals and jails trying to track him down because he knows something happened that's not good. He knows it's not good, especially since Jeff was dreading seeing Cunanan and voiced his concern about his safety. Jeff doesn't show up for work, and then his boyfriend John calls the police, who tell them that Jeff is a big boy, I guess meaning an adult, and unless his parents authorized it, they couldn't file a missing persons report until it's been 72 hours. Of course, he can't tell Jeff's parents he's missing because they would be like, well, who the hell are you? Because Jeff isn't out of the closet to his parents. See, another reason for honesty and acceptance. Parents, because your child, had Jeff, well, I guess the result would have still been the same. But at least maybe we would have caught Cunanan. So if boyfriend John could have called the parents and said, hey, something is wrong with your son, they could have filed a missing persons. The police could have been on it a lot sooner. They could have caught Cunanan a lot earlier, and maybe everyone else in this story could be alive. So, parents, accept your children, for fuck's sake. The next day, the neighbor sees David in the elevator with a man that matches Cunanan's description, and the day after that, another neighbor sees the two men walking David's Dalmatian. His name is Prince, Prints, which is really cute. Prince, because like he's an architect, and then it's a Dalmatian, and the Dalmatian's name is Prince. I thought that was sweet. But point is that a few days go by, and Cunanan and David are living in the loft with the dead body of Jeff. David, of course, isn't going to work at this point, and on April 29th, two female co-workers who are worried about him because it's been 2 days with no word, they come to his place to check if everything is all right. They knock on the door, and they hear whispering on the other side and the dog pawing at the front door. So they say loudly, well, we better call the police, which I think is super smart to scare off whoever. Like, don't go in if you have access. Like, if you hear something on the other side of the door, just say something loud like that. I love that. So they leave, and they ask the super to check in on Jeff because she's got a passkey. When she goes in the loft around 4 p.m., she makes a gruesome discovery. Jeff's body is rolled up in a rug and placed behind the sofa because no one will find it there. There's blood splattered all over the place, and there's 2 sets of bloody footprints. When police arrive, they find the dog is calm. There's no urine or poop anywhere, indicating that he's been taken out for his walks. David's wallet is there, as well as a bloody t-shirt and a bloody hammer. Now it's Tuesday night, and Jeff's parents are contacted, finally. They're at the hospital because this is so sad. The parents are at the hospital because one of Jeff's sisters is having a baby. Can you imagine your daughter is giving birth? This is like one of the happiest moments for a parent's life. But at the same time, they're getting information that their son is missing. So they file a missing persons report for their son, but their son is soon identified as the man in the rug the next morning, and they identify him by the tattoo on his ankle. So the parents are like, oh my God, my daughter just gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby. This is such a wonderful moment. Oh wait, my son has been brutally murdered and wrapped up in a rug. Okay. In the instant that Jeff is identified, David Madsen goes from potential homicide victim to suspected murderer. Quote, it's David Madsen, says Minneapolis Police Sergeant Robert Tichich of the Homicide Division. Quote, it's his apartment. There's a body in there. There's no way to pin it on Cunanan. Now that David is a suspect, police don't even tell his parents that he's missing. They stake out his parents' house, watching to see if David shows up, which he doesn't. David's red Jeep is seen heading north on I-35, moving erratically around the street. Then the 2 men stop at a diner to eat near Rush Lake, north of Minneapolis. Now, what happened between the 2 of them and what was said, we will never know. All we do know for sure is that David and Cunanan were in David's loft for 2 days with Jeff's dead body before getting in David's Jeep and driving north, where David Madsen's dead body is eventually found in tall grass by fishermen on Saturday, May 3rd, on the east shore of Rush Lake near Rush City, Minnesota, with gunshot wounds to the head, through one eye, and at the back of the head, from a .40 caliber Taurus PT-100 semi-automatic pistol. That is the longest name for a gun I have ever seen. Cunanan had taken this gun from Jeff Trail's home. There were no signs of a fight or restraints. We're going to talk after the episode about the relationship between David and Cunanan and how it could have unfolded this way for David and Cunanan post Jeff's murder. But let's continue with the story. Investigators quickly put together that David Madsen and Jeff Trail are connected through a guy named Andrew Cunanan, and that a box of ammunition from Jeff's house is missing, ammunition that matches the bullets that were used on David, along with an empty holster. It seems the police are bumbling idiots in this. I wasn't there, but reports say that they find a duffel bag in David's loft, and they can't figure out who it belongs to. So Monique, David's BFF from earlier, says, "Did you check the ID tag on the bag?" So they look. Oh, there is an ID tag. Oh, wait a minute. The ID tag says Andrew Cunanan. For some reason, it takes the police 2 months to recover a toiletries bag belonging to Cunanan that was sitting in David's loft. Then they overlook a pair of blood-splattered size 36 Levi's jeans tossed in the corner. David is a size 32. They were having trouble identifying the fingerprints they found since Cunanan had never been arrested, and they didn't have his prints on file. David's family, horrified at the discovery of what had happened to their son, conclude that he must have walked in on Cunanan murdering Jeff and then was just taken hostage. So I also watched the Assassination of Gianni Versace, American Crime Story, the scene where Cunanan kills David. Basically, they parked, they're in a field, he's got his gun, he takes it out, David starts running, he shoots him, and then he stands over him and shoots him in the head. In this scene, in the show, though, Cunanan is not regretful of what happened, because there's no regret there, but there's emotion, because he lies down on the corpse of David and sort of like spoons him, kind of, I guess, indicating that he did have feelings for him at some point. Not that he regretted his decision of killing him, but just kind of like a respect, kind of like, hey, you were important to me. And then there's a lot of comments down below that scene of people that were kind of angry because they were saying, well, somebody who is a sociopath and a narcissist and a murderer like this wouldn't display that kind of emotion. They wouldn't have that it would be a lot more cold and calculated. And basically, by the time Cunanan would be ready to murder somebody like that, there is no more emotion attached to it. It's just bang, and that's it. I'm going to do this. I did it. I'm walking away. So, anyway, artistic license. So now that Cunanan has 2 victims under his belt, he drives to Chicago on a mission. Marilyn Miglin is a former dancer who founded a cosmetics company and became a home shopping network celebrity. She begins getting worried when her husband of 38 years, Lee Miglin, doesn't show up to get her from the airport. When she gets home, she finds the gate to the house open and the kitchen turned upside down. She calls the police. Remember I said Miglin? I said earmark that name for later. The lie that Cunanan had told in the past was about a guy named Duke Miglin, who is the son and aspiring actor of this guy, 72-year-old Lee Miglin, a prominent real estate developer and a wealthy man, just Cunanan's type. The son of a Lithuanian coal miner in southern Illinois, Miglin rose from selling pancake mix out of the trunk of his car to become a developer with some of the biggest buildings on the Chicago skyline. But on May 4th, Cunanan binds Miglin's hands and feet, wraps his head with duct tape, and his body is wrapped in plastic, brown paper, and tape. He breaks his ribs, stabs him more than 20 times with a screwdriver, and slits his throat with a hacksaw. Okay, that sounds super personal. And we're going to talk more about that later at the end of the episode as well. Let's keep going with the story. Instead of fleeing the scene, Cunanan makes himself a ham sandwich. He shaves in the white marble bathroom, takes a bath in the sunken tub, and sleeps in Lee's bed. There's physical evidence all over the house for police to find. He takes about $10,000 in cash, a few of Lee's custom suits. The family dog, a Labrador named Honey, is unharmed. Cunanan then steals... Well, that's the thing with this guy. He's a dog lover. I mean, not that there's any redeeming qualities about this guy, but in San Diego, he was known to love all the dogs of his friends. Obviously, he didn't hurt the Dalmatian prince, and he didn't hurt Honey in this instance as well. Cunanan steals Lee's 1994 green Lexus LS sedan. The Lexus has a car phone, which is used in Union County, Pennsylvania, so police track the phone to Philadelphia on May 8th, and then to Penns Grove on May 9th, then eventually to New Jersey. And like, this guy's, for as smart as he is, he doesn't realize that the police are able to track the phone that's in the car. He's eventually in New Jersey, and police now have evidence that Cunanan is in New York City from May 5th to the 8th. Lee's family tell police the killing is completely random, and that nor Lee or his 25-year-old son, Duke Miglin, had ever met Cunanan before. However, there are no signs of forced entry into the Miglin's home. And as I mentioned before, the older, wealthy, socially influential man was exactly the type Cunanan was known to research very carefully. FBI agents argue it's unlikely Cunanan would torture Lee without some sort of motive. And this goes back to my very first episode with Kevin Lee Graff, because Kevin was a drug addict who broke into the homes, at least the first home, and then nobody could understand the connection. And it just feels like this is very similar, where this isn't by accident that he went specifically to this place. He didn't drive all the way to Chicago, right up to this guy's driveway, and then obviously Miglin let him into Miglin obviously led him into the house. There's no sign of forced entry or anything. So they knew each other, even though everyone else is saying that they never knew each other. So obviously, there was a connection, and the only connection that could possibly, exist was, hey, look, sugar daddy, escorting. It's after Lee's murder that Cunanan becomes the 449th fugitive listed on the FBI's most wanted list. Of course, it takes until May 6th for the bumbling police to even find David Madsen's Jeep, which Cunanan stole, remember, and which is now illegally parked with multiple parking tickets on it, only 85 paces from the Miglin house. So now it's Friday, May 9th, and the wife of 45-year-old cemetery caretaker William Reese is worried. Her husband doesn't come home from work for dinner, so she heads out to Finns Point National Cemetery in Pennsville Township, New Jersey, which is a remote historic site where Confederate prisoners were held during the Civil War, and which is located close to several highways and a turnpike to Philly. So she goes there to look for him. When she gets there, she sees a dark green Lexus, which is Lee Miglin's, and she notices the door to William's office is open and the radio is playing inside. Worried, she calls the police. They show up and they find her husband on the concrete floor in a pool of blood, shot in the head with the same gun used to murder David. But unlike his other murders, which were very personal, this one is what clinicians who study serial murders call a functional homicide, because it seems Cunanan killed William so he could steal his 1995 red Chevy pickup truck, which he uses to hightail it to Florida. That's a situation of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's now May 12th. It's a few days later, and Cunanan is staying at a pink stucco, cheap beachfront residence hotel called the Normandy Plaza Hotel in Miami Beach, Florida. He's paying $29 a night for the room in cash. He's going under one of his assumed names, and the night manager would later tell investigators that Cunanan never brought anyone to the room and that he was constantly changing his appearance, which is obviously to go undetected by police, I guess. Apparently he was wearing wigs, which doesn't really make sense because, hold on, that's true. Wait, Patrick, wait. They say he was always changing his appearance and wearing wigs and stuff like that. Like he would have blonde hair, then he would have dark hair. So you would think that he was doing that to try to avoid being recognized by anybody or found by the police. Okay, fine. Yes, but he was using his real name. He was going about town. He was very vocal. He was out in the bars and the clubs. He's talking to people. He's going to pawn shops and using his real name. Like, so there's a bit of a disconnect there. But he was on meth. So why am I looking for any logic? Sorry. Let's move on. While he's staying there, he's eating at the local pizza joint, which is a far cry from the posh restaurants in Paris, for sure. And he goes out every night, all night, dressed up, and hangs out in gay strip clubs called the Boardwalk and another more upscale one called Twist. Next to Twist is the 11th Street Diner. This is a place where South Beach celebrities, politicians, and cops go to all the time. So all the while, Cunanan is going there undetected, right under their noses. All the time, he's waiting for Versace to get to town. A month later, I don't know why it took so long, on June 12th, Cunanan is on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Also, it's about now that police finally decide to search Cunanan's apartment in San Diego for clues and evidence. I mean, come on, guys. TikTok. Cunanan has been in Miami for about 2 months now, and it's the morning of July 15th, 1997. Johnny Versace has left his home, the Casa Casuarina. Was that good? The Casa Casuarina. Casuarina. The Casa Casuarina. Close enough. To walk down the street to get magazines at the News Cafe. As he's walking back to his beachside mansion, Cunanan starts trailing him, and as Versace climbs the steps to his entry gate at about 8:45 a.m., he's shot once in the back of the head and once in the left cheek. Versace's longtime partner, Antonio D'Amico, hears the shots from inside the mansion and comes racing out within seconds and even sees Cunanan leaving the scene. Cunanan turns and starts running. A witness starts just chasing him, but he loses the trail. Cunanan turns down several alleyways, and he's seen escaping on hotel security cameras, entering a municipal parking lot where the red Chevy pickup truck is parked. Witnesses see a man changing his clothes beside the stolen truck. Police would find the discarded clothes beside the truck with his passport, a personal check, clippings of newspaper reports about his earlier murders. This is what they always do. They love to see their dirty work in print. Remember William Bonin and the California freeways? He was abducting boys and then in the back of his, So he kept all the clippings in his truck too, like in the glove compartment, so he could pull them out and reminisce. Oh, and then he does this too. Like while he's staying there, he's not really covering his tracks. So why is he even wearing wigs? I don't know. Because at one point he had gone to a pawn shop to pawn a stolen gold coin that he got from Lee Miglin in Chicago. And as is protocol with a pawn shop, they got his fingerprint, and he uses his real name. So, and the pawn shop submitted that to the police a full week before Versace is shot. So another oversight, another useless murder. Well, not that there are useful ones. Versace is rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital, where he's pronounced dead at 9:21 a.m. The next month, his memorial service takes place in Milan with 2,000 people in attendance, including Princess Diana, So this is July. Princess Diana is at his funeral. She would be dead a few months later. It's so sad. And Elton John was there. Oh, and then he rewrites Candle in the Wind. Naomi Campbell is there, all the fashion elite, of course. Due to the high profile of someone like Versace, there are now 1,000 agents across the United States taking part in one of the country's largest manhunts. It's now July 23rd, 1997, 8 days after Versace is murdered, and a caretaker looking after luxury houseboats that are anchored off of Collins Avenue in Miami, which is only 3 miles away from the scene of Versace's murder, realizes that there is someone inside one of the boats. Then he hears a shot ring out. An assault team closes in on the houseboat and they lob tear gas inside. When they finally enter, they find Andrew Cunanan's body in a second-floor bedroom. He shot himself in the head with the same gun he used to kill David Madsen, William Reese, and Gianni Versace. There's no note or explanation for his crimes. By hiding in Miami after Versace's murder, Cunanan had broken his usual pattern, picking up with a new getaway car. Subsequently, the FBI revealed that within 48 hours of Versace's murder, Cunanan had contacted an associate on the West Coast asking for help in obtaining a false passport to leave the country. So he was trying to, he wasn't planning on committing suicide the whole time. He was still trying to escape. Even after discovering his dead body, police were still getting sightings reporting from all over the country of people who were on high alert, especially in communities where he was known to frequent. Even stories of him maybe trying to pass himself off as a woman. There was another story speculating that he was HIV positive and he was getting revenge on former lovers. But both of those stories turned out to be false. He's cremated, and he's stuck at the Holy Cross Cemetery in San Diego. Ugh, that poor cemetery has to deal with his ashes for the rest of eternity. And so ends the murderous rampage of a guy who wanted so desperately for people to admire him, not for who he was, but for what he could acquire, and a guy who couldn't take any type of rejection, especially from those who were closest to him, paranoid, narcissistic, greedy, vain, a guy who instead of facing the music proved himself a coward too and killed himself. Mic drop. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the individual murder motives, because this is what I'm most fascinated about. Now we've run through the timeline, we've run through the murders, we have the story in our minds, but motive-wise, so Jeff Trail, the first one with the hammer, from the reading that I've done and from my own perspective of what I think and from the shows that I have seen, it seems to me that Cunanan was very jealous, actually, of Jeff's life, of Jeff's appearance, everything that Jeff stood for. He wanted to be him. So it was taking the hammer and hitting him in the face is such a personal, it's such a personal way to murder somebody. Like, I just want to destroy you. I hate you. I know that I will never be you. I want to be you. I'm going to if I can't be you, then you can't be you. And he just physically destroys him and snuffs him out. The trigger for the murder, I feel like he knew that Jeff was going to speak to him about ending this whatever relationship. He knew that they were done and that Jeff didn't want anything to do with him. And somebody like Cunanan just cannot deal with rejection. Will not, just not even cannot, will not deal with rejection. I reject you by smashing your face and killing you. I win, right? Ugh. Okay, let's move on to the next one. David Madsen. So obviously, Cunanan even said David was the love of his life. David, of course, tried him on. They even had their SM experience, dom sub experience happening. They tried it for a while, but it just didn't work. Again, rejection. So David rejected Cunanan. And Cunanan just wanted to be with him, the love of his life, who pushed him away. It's like the ultimate rejection. So by killing him, he gets control over the situation. I feel like the trigger in this case was when I'm wondering, okay, this is totally just me going off. I'm wondering if, so he kills Jeff, and then now maybe he thinks, oh, now me and David can live happily ever after, So they stay in the house for a little bit. I don't know what they were doing there. Like, obviously, we'll talk about the hold that he has over David in another second, in another article that I read. But I think in Cunanan's mind, he thought, oh, now we're going to run away and be together. Maybe on the road when they were, he had made advances and David was rejecting his advances and kind of making it clear, like, no, like, this isn't going to happen. And at some point, Cunanan was like, okay, I can't have you. Nobody's going to have you. Bang, bang. Now, Lee Miglin in Chicago, married 38 years. Was his wife a beard? Did he just like to play with boys on the side? Maybe he did love his wife, and maybe he's bisexual. Who knows what it was? Did he hire escorts? How did Cunanan know Lee Miglin? How did he know him? The family says there was no connection, but of course, they're not going to say it out loud. Even if they do know, which they probably don't, but even if they suspect, they're not going to throw the suspicions around like, well, he was kind of shady and he was on weird male escort sites, but, they're not going to do that. This is a wealthy, connected family. They're not going to, quote unquote, drag their name through the mud by bringing that kind of stuff up. But clearly, I think we can agree that Cunanan knew who Lee Miglin was before he walked into his house that night, right? The trigger, I'm thinking, was that Cunanan is on the run. So he goes to see, he's probably grasping at straws at this point. He's killed his best friend. He's killed the love of his life. Now he needs help. And I feel like he was like, where am I? Okay, I'm in the Midwest. Who do I know? Oh, I know Lee Miglin. He lives in Chicago. He has money. Maybe he can help me. And I feel like he went to go see Lee Miglin. And Lee was like, well, you're fucking crazy. Get out of my house. And that was the end of that. The next one, the fourth murder, William Reese, who just wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, his place of employment was just off the freeway, obviously. At some point, Cunanan was like, I need to dump this Lexus because the police are going to be looking for it, and I need another car. So he just pulls off the freeway into the first place that he sees, which is this cemetery, and he sees the truck, the red truck. He needs the keys, so he gets rid of William Reese. And finally, Gianni Versace. So they had allegedly met in San Francisco 7 years prior to the murder. Did something happen or not? Did they speak? Did they do more? Cunanan was obsessed, as we know, with status and money. So a famous, wealthy fashion designer is living the lifestyle that Cunanan really, really covets, but never wants to work for, obviously. He just wants to be handed this lifestyle. So he wants what he doesn't have. The trigger, maybe he heard Versace was coming to Miami and he felt the walls closing in on him. And he thought, what's the best way to be remembered? I need to murder somebody super famous. Well, here's my connection. I know where he lives. I know where he's going to be. I'll just stake out his house. And that way, Cunanan would be able to have the notoriety, the name recognition that he always wanted, even if it's for something so horrific as this. Obviously, he didn't care, as long as you remember me, right? Okay, so let's discuss why we think David Madsen stays with Cunanan after the murder of Jeff Trails. I think it's about control, because it's just so weird. It's not like a matter of hours or anything. Like, they slept, they ate, they walked the dog. So this is mind control. This isn't even about, he didn't have David tied to a wall or tied to the bed or something. This is mind control. This is mind fuckery. They were living there. It's like somebody described it in an article as Stockholm Syndrome. Like, this guy has control over me. He already killed somebody. I can't leave. Like, this is psychological warfare going on. I can only imagine how fucked up David's mind must have been at that time. To be living in the space with Jeff rolled up in a rug. Just, in the next room. And that goes back to their sexual life and their sexual play. They already had a history where I'm the dominant one. You listen to what I say. And this is next level. Obviously, this isn't just about sex and restraints and stuff like that. This is, I now murdered somebody. You listen to me, because I can murder you too. And unfortunately, he does get murdered. So, as we know, this is a very popular story. I had actually put this story off for a long time because I thought, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, everyone's heard about it. They've probably read about it. They've probably seen TV shows about it. They already know the story. Will people be interested in it? But you have to do it because it's one of those classic true gay crime stories. And obviously, it's been covered many times on TV and in movies. The most popular one, which I talked about a few times during this episode, was the assassination of Gianni Versace. That was in 2018 on the second season of the TV show American Crime Story, brought to us by Ryan Murphy. So Darren Criss of Glee fame stars as Cunanan in that series. Then we have Australian actor Cody Fern, who plays David Madsen, and perennial favorite hottie. Well, okay, they're all hot, let's be honest. But anyway, Finn Wittrock from American Horror Story fame. He plays Jeff Trail. And I'm like, don't hit his face. No. Okay, so interesting side note when I was like researching about these actors, because I know about Finn and I know a little bit about Darren, but I didn't know anything about Cody Fern. So when I was like Googling him and watching some YouTube videos about Cody Fern, it's very interesting. He's very sexy too. He's Australian, first of all, and he doesn't let gender define how he dresses. So he will wear a dress. He doesn't care. He'll wear a skirt. Like, it's not, this is women's wear, that's men's wear. It's, what do I want to wear? The March 2019 GQ Style magazine named Cody Fern Hollywood's gender fuck rebel due to his unrestrained fashion sense. And because of his gender-bending fashion, there is a rumor that he's in a relationship with social media guru. I hate that guru. I hate that word. So, and especially when you put social media in front of it. I don't know why. I don't know. Anyway, with social media guru Eric Smith, which would make him gay. But that is an unsubstantiated rumor. So do not quote me on that. But of course, there are rumors flying around that Cody Fern is gay. But just, you can make your own mind. Just Google him and watch some of his red carpets and you decide for yourself. Of course, it's up to him if he decides whether or not ever to come out of the closet. If he does or doesn't, it's completely up to him. And that's it for this episode, folks. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next episode of True Gay Crime. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to find the True Gay Crime Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at True Gay Crime. And we'd love to hear from you. Do you have an LGBTQ crime story from your city? You can send your story to truegaycrime@gmail.com, and I'll share it on a future episode of the show. Did you know you can subscribe, rate, and review True Gay Crime on Apple Podcasts? It would mean everything to me if you did, because it helps me create content you like, and it lets Apple know to share it with more people. Thank you for listening. And remember, always look behind you, lock your doors, tell someone where you're going, and look out for each other.
Why can't we all just get along?